The deafening, high-pitched screech of grinding metal and failing turbines violently echoed through the sterile, white-walled laboratory. The massive 2-story-tall central manufacturing machine, the absolute beating heart of the most advanced tech giant in Silicon Valley, suddenly shuddered violently. A blinding flash of blue electrical sparks exploded from the main motherboard casing, followed immediately by the suffocating smell of burnt ozone. The flashing red emergency lights bathed the panicked faces of 30 elite engineers in a terrifying, bloody glow. The company's chief executive, Sarah, watched in absolute paralyzing horror as the digital production numbers on the massive wall monitors plummeted directly to zero. The billion-dollar machine was completely, utterly dead. For 7 agonizing days, the greatest technological minds in the world tried to revive it, but they failed. The international experts looked at Sarah and delivered a death sentence. The machine was permanently destroyed. Replacing it would cost over $15,000, a move that would completely bankrupt the company. But as the executives panicked, a 60-year-old man wearing a faded blue uniform slowly stepped out of the dark shadows, leaning heavily on his mop handle. He looked directly at the screaming billionaires and said the most impossible words they had ever heard: "I can fix it." Welcome back to the Wise Chronicles. We are completely conditioned to judge human intelligence by the frame of a college degree or the price tag on a tailored suit. We assume that the people wearing the highest titles possess the absolute greatest knowledge, and we violently underestimate the quiet, invisible people who clean our floors and empty our trash cans. But what happens when the elite experts, armed with billions of dollars of education, completely fail to solve a catastrophic crisis? What do you do when a massive corporate empire is collapsing, and the only person standing between total bankruptcy and absolute salvation is a humble janitor holding a mop? Today's story is a breathtaking, utterly devastating masterclass in unearthing the absolute genius of the working class, exposing corporate arrogance, and delivering the most flawless, spectacular reality check in Silicon Valley history. It is the story of a brilliant custodian who was treated like an absolute peasant, and the terrifying, devastating trap he survived to save an entire company. If you believe that true wisdom is forged in the fires of experience, and that absolute karma always exposes the arrogant, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You do not want to miss the unbelievable true stories we share here on the Wise Chronicles. Now let's go back to that panicking red-lit laboratory, where the elite experts gave up and an absolute legend woke up. The tech giant was the absolute pinnacle of Silicon Valley innovation. They manufactured highly classified, incredibly complex microprocessors used in everything from advanced medical equipment to deep space satellites. The entire multi-billion-dollar empire completely relied on one single, massively complex manufacturing machine. It was a technological marvel, heavily guarded in a climate-controlled, glass-walled laboratory. Sarah, the brilliant but incredibly stressed chief executive officer, had built the company from the ground up. But when the machine violently failed, her entire world completely shattered. Every single hour the machine was down, the company lost exactly $10,000 in delayed global shipments. The stock price was violently crashing. Investors were threatening to pull their massive funding. Desperate, Sarah flew in a renowned international tech expert from Germany, paying him a massive $500,000 consulting fee just to look at the machine. He arrived wearing a $5,000 silk suit, flanked by a team of elite, arrogant engineers. For 7 days, they dismantled the machine. They ran highly advanced computer diagnostics. They measured electrical currents using military-grade scanners. But absolutely nothing worked. The machine refused to power on. On the 7th night, the international expert threw his clipboard onto the glass table. "It is finished, Sarah," the expert declared arrogantly, adjusting his expensive tie. "The central quantum motherboard has completely failed on a microscopic level. It is irreparably dead. You have absolutely no choice. You must order a complete replacement of the central core. It will cost exactly $15 billion, and it will take 6 months to build." Sarah collapsed into her leather chair, burying her face in her trembling hands. $15 billion. It was an absolute death sentence. The company would have to file for massive bankruptcy by Friday. Thousands of innocent employees would lose their jobs. That is exactly when Daniel stepped forward. Daniel was 60 years old. He was the invisible, quiet night shift custodian, He spent his nights emptying the trash cans of the arrogant executives who never even bothered to learn his name. But Daniel wasn't just a man with a mop. Before a horrific, tragic medical bankruptcy completely wiped out his life savings and forced him into low-wage custodial work, Daniel grew up in the gritty, industrial heart of Detroit. His late father was a master mechanic, a man who could listen to the hum of an engine and instantly diagnose the absolute most complex mechanical failures. Daniel had spent his entire youth taking apart heavy machinery, learning to deeply, intimately understand how raw physics and mechanics actually work together. Daniel had been quietly sweeping the floor of the laboratory for the last 7 days, silently watching the elite engineers make massive, fundamental mistakes. He walked directly into the center of the room. "Excuse me, ma'am," Daniel said, his voice deep, calm, and completely fearless. "You don't need to spend $15 billion. I know exactly what is wrong with the machine. Give me an hour and I can fix it." The entire laboratory went completely dead silent. And then the international expert let out a loud, mocking laugh. "You?" The expert scoffed, looking Daniel up and down with absolute, unfiltered disgust. "A janitor? You want to fix a highly advanced quantum manufacturing core? Get out of this laboratory before you accidentally unplug something and electrocute yourself." The other elite engineers started chuckling, whispering cruel insults to each other. But Sarah didn't laugh. She looked at Daniel. She was desperate. She was staring at absolute bankruptcy, and she had absolutely nothing left to lose. But the immense, crushing pressure of the board of directors made her ruthless. "Daniel," Sarah said, her voice turning to absolute, terrifying ice, "I am going to give you exactly 3 hours. If you actually fix this machine, I will personally write you a check for $1 million, and you will never have to push a mop again." Daniel nodded calmly. "But," Sarah continued, stepping closer to him, her eyes completely merciless, "if you touch that machine and fail, if you cause even a single dollar of further damage, I will throw you directly to the press. You will face the media tomorrow morning, and you will take the absolute, complete public blame for destroying this company. Do you understand the trap you are walking into?" It was a devastating, terrifying ultimatum. She was perfectly willing to use a 60-year-old custodian as a massive public scapegoat to save her own reputation if he failed. Daniel didn't flinch. "I understand," he replied. "Now I need you to clear this room, and I need someone to bring me exactly 2 items. The international expert crossed his arms. "What do you need? A multimeter? A laser soldering iron?" "No," Daniel said, completely deadpan. "I need a small bottle of rubbing alcohol, and I need a massive 20-pound bag of raw, uncooked rice." The elite engineers completely lost their minds. They thought he was absolutely certifiably insane. They mocked him, claiming the stress of the job had finally broken the old man's brain. But Sarah raised her hand, silencing them, and ordered her assistant to get exactly what Daniel asked for. When the room was finally clear, Daniel approached the massive dead machine. He didn't use advanced computer diagnostics. He used his eyes. He used his bare hands. He carefully unscrewed the heavy titanium plating covering the central motherboard. Daniel's deep Detroit-forged intuition had told him something the elite engineers completely missed. When the machine had sparked and died 7 days ago, Daniel hadn't just smelled burnt ozone. He had smelled the incredibly faint, distinct scent of stagnant water. He carefully pulled the massive, incredibly complex motherboard out of its housing. He took the bottle of rubbing alcohol and a soft microfiber cloth, meticulously, gently wiping down the microscopic circuits. He was looking for something very specific. And there it was, hidden deep beneath the central processing chip, completely invisible to the arrogant experts who only looked at computer screens, was a tiny, microscopic layer of trapped condensation. Moisture. Water had somehow entered the sealed machine and caused a massive, silent short circuit. Daniel took the 20-pound bag of raw rice. He poured it into a massive plastic bin. He took the billion-dollar motherboard and completely, deeply buried it inside the raw rice. For 2.5 agonizing hours, Daniel sat in absolute silence. He knew exactly what he was doing. The rice acted as a massive, natural desiccant. It slowly, safely, and completely absorbed every single microscopic drop of trapped moisture from the deep crevices of the motherboard. It was a classic old-school fix his father had taught him decades ago in a dusty garage in Detroit. Outside the glass walls, the international experts were pacing, laughing and preparing their press statements to completely destroy Daniel's life. When the 3 hours were finally up, Sarah marched into the laboratory, followed by the smirking engineers. "Time is up, Daniel," Sarah said coldly. "The press is waiting outside." Daniel didn't say a word. He calmly pulled the motherboard out of the rice. He used a soft air compressor to blow away the dust. He carefully slid the massive board back into the titanium housing and locked the heavy bolts into place. He stepped back. He looked at Sarah and he hit the massive green power button. For 3 terrifying seconds, there was absolute silence. And then, a deep, low hum began to vibrate through the floor. The massive turbines slowly began to spin. The bright blue LED lights across the motherboard illuminated flawlessly. The elite engineers gasped in absolute, unadulterated horror. They had spent 7 days and $500,000 failing to do what a custodian just did with a bag of grocery store rice. Sarah was completely paralyzed. Tears of absolute shock and relief streamed down her face. "It was a microscopic moisture short," Daniel said calmly, picking up his mop. "The alcohol cleaned the corrosion. The rice absorbed the water. It's an old-school fix. You just had to look closely." But the massive, terrifying mystery remained. How did water get inside a hermetically sealed, highly secure laboratory? Sarah immediately ordered her security team to pull the highly encrypted surveillance footage from the night the machine broke down. When they played the video on the massive screens, the absolute, devastating truth came crashing down. It wasn't an accident. It was a massive, calculated corporate sabotage. The grainy footage showed a man sneaking into the laboratory at 2 a.m. He walked directly up to the machine's primary cooling vents, unscrewed the cap of a water bottle, and deliberately poured the liquid directly into the billion-dollar core. The man in the video was Sarah's own older brother. Her brother had been an executive at the company. 6 months ago, Sarah had passed him up for a massive promotion, giving the job to someone more qualified. Blinded by absolute toxic jealousy and rage, her own flesh and blood had deliberately destroyed the machine, perfectly willing to bankrupt his sister's entire empire, just to get revenge. Sarah didn't hesitate. She didn't protect her family. She prioritized absolute justice. She immediately called corporate security and the local police. Her brother was dragged out of his luxury corner office in heavy steel handcuffs, screaming and crying as the police read him his rights. He was charged with massive corporate sabotage and sued into absolute oblivion by the company's board of directors. As for Daniel, Sarah kept her absolute promise. At a massive company-wide grand ceremony the very next morning, Sarah publicly humiliated the international experts and sent them packing. She handed Daniel a massive certified check for exactly $1,000, but she didn't stop there. She officially stripped him of his custodial uniform. She appointed Daniel as the permanent, highly paid senior technical advisor to the executive board. Daniel took his millions, bought a beautiful home in the countryside, and finally reclaimed the dignity and respect that a tragic life had temporarily stolen from him. We are constantly blinded by the loud, arrogant, and flashy people in this world. We think that power wears an expensive suit, and that the quiet, invisible people in the background simply do not matter. But true knowledge is not printed on a university diploma. It is forged with dirty hands, late nights, and profound, silent experience. When the world is collapsing and the billionaires are panicking, you do not look to the men in the suits to save you. You look to the quiet people who know how to clean up the mess. You treat everyone with absolute respect, because you never know when the person holding the mop is actually the absolute master of the empire. What would you have done if a janitor told you he could fix a $15 billion machine? Would you have laughed at him? Or would you have given him the bag of rice exactly like Sarah did? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one of them. If this breathtaking story of silent dignity, unsung heroism, and absolute devastating karma made you cheer, please hit that like button and share this video. And be sure to subscribe to the Wise Chronicles for more incredible true stories of survival.